transition, and unmute my mic. Okay, hi guys, sorry about the delay this afternoon even, having a bit of technical problems there, but we are back on live and we are going to be having a look at the second half of the Germany paper. So we had a look last time at question 1. Okay, hi guys, sorry about the delay this afternoon even, having a bit of technical, there we go. We were having a bit of a problem with the we looked at question 1A last time, which was the source question, which is the what can we infer, and we had a look at 2 of those questions. We had a look at a picture source and we had a look at a text source, and we also had a look at question 2, which is they explain why. So if you missed that, you can catch up with that in my previous videos. Go and have a look. And you can run through that, and there are also full explain why question videos in my feed. However, today we're going to be looking at question 3, which is the question 3 is the long one with the interpretations and the sources. So if you haven't got a copy of these, you can go into the chat and there's the pinned post which has got the link to my website, which is www.thehistoryteacher.net, where you can go and download the copy of the sources and a copy of the interpretations, and you can have a look at those and they will help you to work your way through this, follow along as we go, but we are going to be working our way through together. So you are going to need for this live 2 highlighters. So 1, 2, and you are also going to need 2 pens. So there's 1, and she says I should have had these out, but there we are. And I'm going to have a pencil as well. So a pen and a pencil and 2 highlighters. You're going to need those because we are going to be working with sources and interpretations today. The only reason I say 2 highlighters is just because 1 runs out. We don't want to be having to waste time in the exam, putting our hands up and waiting for an examiner to come and help us. Just a quick reminder, on the front of your paper, you've got 1 hour and 30 minutes for this paper. You need to be writing in black ink or ballpoint pen, and you need to fill in the boxes at the front just to make sure you've got your name and all the information on that, because you don't want to be hoping that they've remembered to go looking for you in the you don't want your paper to be going missing. That's not a fun thing. Okay, so let's jump in. So we did our interpretations last time, so our source and long question last time. So this time we're going to be looking at question 3. So question 3 is a really long question. It's got 4 parts to it. So you'll notice it's question 3A, question 3B, question 3C, and question 3D. All of them have the same part at the end, and the same part at the end looks like this: an inquiry into, and then the bit after that is going to be the same thing. So it's an inquiry into. In this case, we're going to be looking at an inquiry into how Germany's churches responded to a Nazi control in the years 1933 to 39. So this is really important. There's a couple of key things we need to pick out here. So the first thing we need to pick out is the fact that it is Germany's churches. So we're looking at church control, the churches, all the different churches in Germany, but we're going to be specifically looking at the Protestants and the Catholics. Okay, so you will remember from your revision that they are the 2 key churches that we look at and their responses. We also need to be looking at how they responded. So this is not what they did, this is not how they were bimbling along under normal, like their normal day-to-day lives. This is how they responded to that Nazi control. Okay, so this is going to be about resistance and opposition. Okay, so whether they gave in, whether they just kind of agreed, or whether they tried to resist. Okay, and then it's all about that Nazi control. And then obviously we're focusing on the years 1933 to 39. So this tells us which part of the topics we are looking at. So the years 1933 to 39 tells us that we're looking at topic 3, not any of the early topics. So all of the questions are going to be focused on this, Germany's churches. So that's nice. We don't have to think about any other revision topics now. This is all we're focused on. So let's have a look at our sources. Well, let's have a look at the question first of all. The question is, how useful are sources B and C for this inquiry? So this inquiry that we're looking into, how did Germany's churches respond to Nazi control in those years? Okay, so we're going to have a look at sources B and C. We're going to look at those sources and we're going to decide how useful those sources are. Now, I'm going to let you into a little secret now. They will never give you a source that is not useful, because what a waste of time that would be. So all those sources are always going to be somewhat useful. So we're going to be having a look at sources that are relevant to the topic, and we're going to be looking at sources that are useful to the topic. So let's start off by having a look at source B. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here to help us look. So let's zoom in a little bit. Source B. Let's hope that is. Try and focus for a second. Ooh. Try and focus. Is that good? Yeah, that looks good. Try and weigh that down a bit. There we go. Cool. Okay. So just check that's nice and focused. Okay, lovely. So the first source is a written source, and we are going to be looking at this written source. It's quite long, but there is some key things we're going to pick out from it. So we're going to need our highlighter, and I'm going to write on it in pencil. Now, you can write all over this because the examiners are not going to collect this in. They're never going to see what you've written on this, so feel free to write all over it and make as many notes as you need to. So we're going to be making some notes to think about how useful this is. Now, you don't have a lot of time on this question. You've only got about 15 minutes. So we need to just quickly pick out some quick details to think about how useful this is. So all we need to do at this point is really think about understanding this source. And this one's quite a tricky one. So this is an extract from a statement written in October 1934 by a Protestant church leader who were part of the Confessing Church. Now, hopefully you remember this from your revision, the Confessing Church. It was produced in a meeting in Berlin by the Second Confessing Synod. Now, a synod just means a sort of meeting of church leaders. That's all that is. It's just a meeting. It's just a posh name for it. Okay. And we declared that they said in their meeting, this is kind of like the decisions that they made in their meeting. So let's have a look at what they decided. It says, we declare that the constitution of the German Evangelical Church has been destroyed. So the church has been destroyed. That's key. The church has been destroyed, presumably by the Nazis. Its legally constituted organs no longer exist. The men who have seized the church leadership in the Reich and the States have divorced themselves from the Christian church. So divorced themselves. So presumably they're saying that these men are not proper Christians. In virtue of the right of churches, the religious communities and holders of the ecclesiastical office, in other words, just the people who are in the church, the people who are priests and so on, bound by scripture and confession to act in an emergency of the confessional synod of the evangelical church, establishes new leaders or leadership. So we are setting up a new leadership because we don't think that the existing leadership are worth anything because the Nazis have taken over, in other words. We summon the Christian communities, their pastors and elders, to accept no directives from the present church governance. So we're saying you should not take orders from the people who are in charge at the moment, because they are not proper Christians, and to decline cooperation from those who wish to remain obedient to this ecclesiastical governance. We summon them to observe the directives of the Confessional Synod from the German Evangelical Church and its recognised organs. So, in other words, they are very simply saying the church has been destroyed by the Nazis. The leadership that exists at the moment are doing as they're told by the Nazis, and therefore we don't think that they are very good Christians, and that we are saying to people, you should not do as you are told by those people. That's all this is. It's a lot of words to say those things very simply. Okay, let's have a look at the second source. Now this one, I'm pretty sure you will recognise this picture. It's a very famous picture, and it's pretty much in every single textbook. So this is a picture, as this photograph shows Adolf Hitler meeting Cesare, I can never say his name, Cesare Orsenigo, the Pope's official representative in Germany in 1935, and was taken by Heinrich Hoffmann, the Hitler's official photographer. And it's a pretty straightforward picture, isn't it? It's the Pope's representative meeting with Hitler. They're smiling. They look very friendly. It shows them looking pretty chummy together. So what can we work out from this? They are smiling. They are friendly. It looks like they're doing a deal. They're getting on together. What do we know? We've got some pretty good knowledge, haven't we? We know about the Concordat. Yep, so let's jot that down. What's the Concordat? You know as well as I do that that is an agreement between the Catholic Church and the Nazis, that the Catholic Church wouldn't interfere with the behaviour of the Nazis as long as the Nazis didn't interfere with the behaviour of the Catholic Church. So, how are we going to structure our answer? We've got some good sources, so we need to now think about answering our question. So let's go back to our question. Our question is, we need to explain our answer, how useful are sources B and C, explain your answer using B and C, and your knowledge of the historical context. So, we're going to use a structure that I call COP. Content, own knowledge, provenance. So, the content is what's in the source. This is so easy. You're just going to write down what the source shows you. So in the first one, you're just going to be saying, the source tells me that the confessing church believed that the church had been destroyed by the Nazis and they couldn't trust the leadership. So they were calling on people to not follow the instructions of the church. And the second source tells me that the church, don't include the Concordat yet because that's own knowledge. We'll come back to that. But the source shows me that the Catholic Church were meeting with the Nazis and they were getting on and they were pretty friendly. And they were pretty prepared to appear publicly with them. So that's not hard because that's just what the source tells you. You're not asking any complicated information. Then your own knowledge. This is the stuff that you've revised. Okay? So, what are we going to include here? Here, we're just going to include our revision. So, let's go to my model answer. Okay, so, I'm going to start my model answer. I'm going to start with a single sentence that just says whether I think this source is useful or not. So I'm going to start with source B. Source B is really useful, I think, because it's got a lot of information. So it's very useful for an inquiry into how Germany's churches responded to Nazi control because it shows clear resistance from within the Protestant church. Okay? The source calls on Christians to reject orders from the Nazi-controlled leadership and refuse cooperation, showing open opposition. It also mentions setting up a new church leadership, showing organised resistance. So again, all I've done there is I've just basically rewritten what they said in the source. I've not done anything exciting there. I've not planned anything. I've not come up with any earth-shattering revelations. I've just written down what it says in the source. Then, my own knowledge. This links to my revision. Which is that the confessing church, which opposed Nazi control of the Protestant churches. Remember Martin Niemöller? He's the guy who's involved in the confessing church. Leaders such as Martin Niemöller, there he is, the guy who wrote the First They Came For, that's him, spoke out and some were arrested, showing that resistance existed but was limited. Okay, so we're showing that there is some resistance. The Protestant church has got the confessing church within it. Remember, little facts that you might want to add is that resistance was existed but it was limited, as only 4,000 people, ministers joined. You could add that if you wanted to add a little bit of extra knowledge. No, this is the 8. Okay, this is the 8 marker, guys. This is question 3A. So this is the 8 mark question. Thank you. Good question. This is the 8 mark question. So you should spend about 15 minutes on this question. So you are this is the how useful question. And the source is more useful because it's, you don't really need to do this, but you're going to this is just your little bit of provenance. This source is useful because it was written in 1934. So it's right smack bang in our period. So this is your provenance. It is written by the confessing church leaders, so it directly shows the views of those resisting Nazi control. So that's our provenance. Okay. Then we go back into our next source, source C. Somewhat useful for an inquiry into the church responses. The reason I'm going for it somewhat being useful is because it's only a picture. It's only giving us a snapshot. It doesn't give us a great deal of information. Unlike the last one, which gives us quite a lot, this one's only giving us a little bit. So it's somewhat useful because it suggests that cooperation between the Catholic Church and the Nazi regime. So it's only suggesting it. It's not giving us an outright evidence.
That's lack of context.
Yeah, it's got lack of context. So the photograph shows Hitler meeting the Pope's representative, which suggests a formal and respectful relationship. This implies that church leaders were willing to deal with the Nazis. So it's implying, it's not clearly stating. That's the problem. So what do I know? Well, we all know about the Concordat, right? Okay, so the Concordat, where the Catholic Church agreed to cooperate in return for protection, even though some Catholics later resisted. They did, but not in the great numbers that the Protestants did. However, its usefulness is limited because it was taken by Hitler's official photographer, so it might have been staged to make the relationship look more positive than it really was. So that little bit of provenance in the end is what is going to get you to that level 3 answer, because if we come to the mark scheme, we need to, let me zoom in a little bit again on this because the mark scheme is kind of hard, kind of hard to see. Let me just zoom in and autofocus that. There we go. Because it says that in order to get a level 3 answer, you need to take into account how the provenance affects the source utility. So in order to get that mark, you must include a little judgment on the provenance. Okay, so thank you. Oh, keep dropping the camera. 1 second. Thank you. Just dropped my tea, guys, so bear with me. There we go. Right. There we go. Right. Thank you. Okie dokie. Okay, so that's question, that is 3A. That's the 8 mark how useful question. So let's, yeah, that's all. It's fine. Okay, so let's move on and we'll have a quick look at questions 3B and 3C. These are pretty straightforward, so we'll whiz through these and then we'll go on to the big 3D question. So we're sticking to the religion question because these are, as I said to you, question 3 is all on one topic. Religion has never come up as a question 3. And actually it's never come up at all in the exams. So I think it's worth revising. It's definitely worth revising. It's never come up as a question. So let's move into this. I'm not saying it will come up. I'm just saying it's never come up. Okay, so let's look at the next question. So this is question 3B. So we're still on exactly the same question, same inquiry. So again, we are on how Germany's churches responded to Nazi control in the years 1933 to 39. But this time we are looking at study interpretations 1 and 2. They give different views about how Germany's churches respond to Nazi control in the years 1933 to 39. What is the main difference between these views? Explain your answer using details from both interpretations. Okay, so these questions are entirely designed to build you up to get full marks, to help you answer question 3D. So the whole entire purpose of questions 3B and 3C is to help you answer 3D. That's the entire point of them. So that's the reason they exist. So getting these questions right will help you. So let's have a look at the interpretations. Let's start off by looking at interpretation 1. Okay, so interpretation 1. Let's put my light on a bit more. There we go. There we go. Right. Lovely. Lovely. Okay, so interpretation 1 is from, so remember that interpretations are written by historians. These are usually written sometime in the last 20 to 30 years. They are written by historians, and they are the interpretations of historians about history. So they are really, they're not contemporary sources, they're not written at the time. These are historians looking back at history and going, okay, what do I think happened in the past? So let's start by looking at this one. This is from a book called The Nazi Dictatorship by a historian called Ian Kershaw, very, very highly respected historian of the Nazi period. And this was published in 2015, so very recent historian. And it says, it has been estimated that around 1 in 3 Catholic priests suffered some kind of reprisal during the Third Reich. Around 400 German priests and 35 evangelical pastors were incarcerated in the priest block at Dachau alone as a consequence of their unwavering Christian beliefs and principles. The churches offered something less than fundamental resistance to Nazism. Their considerable efforts in opposing Nazi interference with traditional practices were not matched by equally vigorous denunciation of Nazi inhumanity and barbarism. So denunciation just means like loud disagreement. Okay, so just to help you with that one. Okay, lovely. So what is he saying in this one? He's saying that 1 in 3 Catholic priests, let's pick this out, 1 in 3 Catholic priests suffered some kind of reprisal. 400 German Catholic priests and only 35 evangelical priests were incarcerated, so put in prison in the priest blocks at Dachau. So Dachau, you will remember, is one of the worst of the concentration camps. The churches offered something less than fundamental resistance. So they didn't, something less than fundamental resistance. So he's saying that they didn't offer a lot of resistance. Their considerable efforts in opposing Nazi interference. So they were opposed any interference in the way that they carried out their religion, but this was not matched by equally vigorous argument with the way that the Nazis carried out the way that they behaved. So that's what he's saying. So, thinking about that, what's his point of view? His point of view is that actually 400 Catholic priests and 35 evangelical pastors, it doesn't actually seem very many, does it? If you think about it, considering if you think about it in terms of the number of people who actually were in Dachau, which was a huge number of people. However, there was a priest bloc and there was some resistance. He's also saying that there was some resistance in terms of the number of people. There was some resistance, but it was mostly focused on interference in the way that the church carried out its resistance, and that but it wasn't really aimed at calling out Nazi inhumanity or the way that the Nazis were behaving. Okay, let's have a look at the next bit. So, many of the leaders of the interpretation 2. So I'm going to go with the main point of interpretation 1. I'm just going to put it down here. Interpretation 1. Some resistance, but limited. Okay, interpretation 2. From Kaiser to Führer, Germany 1900 to 45 by Martin Collier. Again, another historian of this period. Published in 2009, so a little bit further back in time, but again, quite recent. And he says, many of the leaders of Germany's Christian churches welcomed the Nazi seizure of power. So, a very different beginning. Church leaders feared the spread of communism and so regarded Hitler's revolution as saving them from the communist threat. Why do they fear the spread of communism? Because communism is very anti-religion. Communism would get rid of religion tomorrow. Okay, Nazi anti-Semitism posed moral problems for some church leaders, but most believed that the Jews had become too dominant within society. In any case, leaders from both the Catholic and Protestant churches believed that they would do better to go along with the Nazis than to confront them. So his message is very clear, that on the whole, church leaders went along with the Nazis. So, interpretation 2, most church leaders supported. So, we come back to our question. They give different views. What is the main difference? Well, the main difference is interpretation 1 is saying that there is some resistance, but it is limited. Interpretation 2 is saying actually most people supported it. That's the difference. It's as simple as that. So we'll come to our model answer. If I can find my model answer, we will look at my model answer. You see, if this was slick and professional, you wouldn't know it was me. There we go. Okay, so it's as simple as this. You are literally looking for 3 sentences. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There we go, so you can see the whole question. There we go. So, the main difference is that interpretation 1 suggests that the churches showed limited resistance to Nazism, while interpretation 2 argues that church leaders largely supported and cooperated within the Nazi regime. And that is your answer. That's the main difference. Now, that is 2 marks. There you go. As an examiner, I'm like, 2 marks, move on. What am I looking for to give it 4 marks? I just need you to pull out details to get your extra marks. So, here's my, for example. Interpretation 1 says that although some priests and pastors were punished for their beliefs, the churches did not offer strong or resistance to Nazi brutality. I probably would have stopped. I could stop there. You could stop there. If you're feeling a little bit anxious, you might want to continue, but focusing instead on protecting their own traditions. Yeah, I'm probably being a little bit too over anxious in my answer there, but yeah, it needs to be like 1 sentence, for example. However, interpretation 2 says that many church leaders welcomed Hitler's rise to power because they feared communism and were willing to work with the Nazis. Again, I'm being a bit anxious. You can probably stop there. Okay, so that's it. Another mark, another mark. So as an examiner, that's my 4 marks. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Right, let's look at my next 4-mark question. Again, this is building you up to get your full marks on your 16-mark question. So they give different views. As we're back to study interpretations 1 and 2, they give different views about how Germany's churches responded to Nazi control in the years 1933 to 39. Again, and I'm looking at the wrong question. 1 second. Because it is here. Here we go. So, suggest one reason why interpretations 1 and 2 give different views about how Germany's churches responded to Nazi control in the years 1933 to 39. One reason why. Why do they have different views? And here is your answer. And this is always the answer. There are several different things you can always give, but this is the one I always give. Because they have looked at different sources. I once typed into the National Archives, and this is the British National Archives, bearing in mind. There is also American sources, there are also French sources, German sources, so many sources. Sorry, I should have asked, was there any questions about that?
There is.
Yes, sorry.
So when you're going through your 4 points, you've got your 2 points. When you go through your 4 example, can you take direct quotes from the interpretation?
Yeah, and in fact you should. Yeah, just literally just a very quick bit of evidence from the interpretations is exactly what you should do. Yeah, it's a really easy question. Don't overthink that question at all. Just go, here's my bit of evidence from the interpretation, and here's my other bit of evidence from the interpretation. That's exactly it. Lovely. You can just put it in the chat, or you can just click on the 3 dots, I think. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, sorry. So suggest one reason. So the reason why is because they've looked at different sources. So yeah, I once typed into the National Archives Nazi Germany, and I got 180,000 hits. So that should give you an idea that as a historian, if you are doing research into Nazi Germany, you will be faced with hundreds of thousands of sources. So the chances of any historian looking at the same source is extremely unlikely. So my answer to this will always be, they have, let's zoom in on my answer. Here we go. They have looked at different views because they may have looked at different sources. That is always your answer. And that is 2 marks. That is, your first sentence is 2 marks. If you write that sentence, you will get 2 marks. There you go. Boom. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Okay, to get your 4 marks, you need to just kind of back that up though. So, for example, the author of interpretation 1 may have looked at more sources like source B, because you're going to back this up with a source, because the sources will always match. You will have one interpretation that matches one of the sources and one interpretation that matches the other source. So in this time, interpretation 1 matches source B because it shows a resistance, and interpretation 2 matches source C because it shows cooperation. And that's it. It's easy as peasy. It's easy as that, honestly. So interpretation 1 may have looked at more sources like source B because it shows resistance from within the churches, such as the Conversion Church resisting Nazi control. And again, I've got a bit anxious, but this would support the view that some church leaders and priests oppose the Nazis. But again, I've got a little bit anxious and gone a bit OTT, but you don't need to do that. The author of interpretation 2 may have looked at more sources like source C because it shows cooperation between the church leaders and the Nazi regime, such as Hitler meeting the Pope's representative. And again, I've over-explained because I've got anxious, but again, you don't need to do that. And that is a nice, easy for an examiner, 4 marks. Lovely job.
Just to clarify, question 3B and 3C, one example for each. Both of those give 1 point.
Yeah, exactly so. Both of those give 1 point. Example 1, 1 mark. Example 2, 2 marks. So, exactly so. So, yeah. So, to get the 2 marks, you just have to give a reason. And then to get the extra marks, you have to give the example. That's exactly how that works. Lovely. Right. Let's move swiftly on to the biggie, question 3D. Okay, so this is our biggie. So, the first thing I will say is SPAG. Spelling, punctuation and grammar, blah, 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 whatever. Ignore it. Like, honestly. Teachers, I don't know whether teachers are still doing this, but I genuinely think it's not worth your time to get upset about SPAG. Because most people, I'm sorry, 1 second. Most people will get about 3 marks for SPAG. Most people. Because the way that SPAG is allocated is like, if your answer is extremely good, if you're getting 16 marks, you are getting 4 for SPAG. If you are getting around the 12 marks and your handwriting is perfectly good, your spelling is perfectly good, you know, you've got a couple of errors, and other than you getting, you know, your handwriting being extraordinarily good and your spelling being extraordinarily good, you're not getting more than 3. And if your handwriting is completely illegible, then you're going to get a 1. Other than that, you're getting 2 or 3. So I really, really wouldn't worry about SPAG. SPAG is neither here nor there. And in the scheme of things, dropping a mark is barely worth getting upset about.
Capitalisation is quite important or not?
I genuinely don't get that upset. I mean, like, make it nice and tidy, but don't sit and get upset about SPAG is my top tip. Like, I think some teachers kind of focus on it. Oh, you've got to spell it right and all the rest of it. Like, there are some words on here, like Martin Niemöller. I mean, like, the amount of times I spell Niemöller the wrong way round is untrue. And no examiner is going to be like, well, you only get a 2 for SPAG because you spelled Niemöller wrong. Like, nobody's going to do that. It's fine. Right, I'll stop moving that camera around because I'm trying to get it straight. Okay, so, okay, let's have a look at question D. So we're going to mostly ignore SPAG. Don't worry about it. Okay, so let's go back to how far do you agree with interpretation 2? So interpretation 2 is the one we're going to focus on this time. We're going to, it's starting to ask you how far do you agree with interpretation 2. So we're going to go back to that, and then about Germany's churches. Oh, that's a beautiful bit of writing by me. How Germany's churches responded to Nazi control in the years 1933 to 39. Explain your answer using both interpretations and your knowledge of the historical context. Okay, so this is a technically 16-mark question, although some teachers call it a 20-mark question because it includes the SPAG. But since we're ignoring the SPAG, we're going to call it a 16-mark question. So, I use a structure for this question called, I use point, evidence, explain, analyse, but then I chuck in an extra one, which I call language. Okay, so we're doing normal peel, evidence, explain, analyse. Now remember, I always do analyse. I don't do link because you should be linking to the question in your point. You shouldn't be linking back to the end of the question at the end of your paragraph because that's pointless. You need to be doing analysis at this stage, guys. Because you need to be, if you want to get a level 4 answer, you need to be getting your analysis in, which is judging how far this answers the question. But this time we're going to be doing language. Okay, and the reason we're going to be doing language and spelling it horribly, see, I said I said to you that we're not going to worry about SPAG, is the reason we're going to be doing that is because we're going to be having a look at the mark scheme. And the mark scheme wants you to consider things like tone and things like that. Now, this is not horrible. You do this in English all the time. So we're not going to get upset about this. So let's have a look at the mark scheme. We go into, let's zoom right in so we can see it. Let's look at the top of the level 4 answer. We're not going to panic about this because you do this all the time in English. So your answer explained and explained. So there's your explain. Evaluation. We'll talk about evaluation in a minute. Reviewing the alternative views. We'll talk about that in a minute. Coming to a substantiated judgment. Precise analysis. That's my A. Okay. Of the interpretations is shown, indicating the differences of view. How the differences of view are conveyed. We'll talk about that. That's the language. Okay. So thinking about tone and the way things are judged. Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. So, relevant contextual knowledge, that's your evidence, is precisely selected to support the evaluation and an overall judgment is justified. Okay, so that is how we're going to get to this top level 4 answer. And whenever we are doing a level 4 answer, we need to include analysis, because if we go level 1 is knowledge. I can't spell today, can I? Let's do this. So that's your point. That's your evidence. And that's your explain. Okay, that's how your levels work. Hopefully that makes sense. Right, but this time we need to include some language. So let's go in and remind ourselves. We've just spent 3 questions building up to this answer because we've spent a bit of time thinking about the primary sources. We thought about, the examiners have very carefully reminded us about the confessing church. They've reminded us of the Concordat. Thank you very much, examiners. You see, they're very carefully building us up to this. Then they've given us a nice examiner's historian's judgment that actually there was resistance, but it was somewhat limited. Then they've given us a judgment that actually most church leaders supported it. So what they've done is they've built us up to the point where we're now going to answer this question. So let me get my model answer and we're going to have a go at answering it. So here we go. We're going to start with interpretation 2. So interpretation 2 says that most church leaders did cooperate. So I'm going to start with, straight away, I'm going to lay out my stall. I'm going to start with my introduction. I'm going to give a 1-sentence introduction because I'm going to I need to make sure that I've given a judgment. And the reason for this is if I don't give a judgment, I'm going to get trapped at around a level 1 or 2. Because it says in the mark scheme that in order to get a level 2, I need to offer a valid evaluative comment. Now, if I don't give a judgment, I cannot get into that level 2 because I haven't offered a valid evaluative comment. So I'm going to make sure I have started off with my valid evaluative comment. And that is, I partly agree with interpretation 2. Now, to make it valid, that's my evaluative comment. I partly agree. That's evaluative. Now, to make it valid, I need to explain why. So, why do I agree that? Because many church leaders did cooperate with the Nazis, but this view does not fully show the resistance from some Christians, which is explained in interpretation 1. Okay? So, I do agree with it, but there were some people who did try to resist, so here's my comment. Okay? So, I'm going to do my points. I'm going to do my paragraph structure. I only need to write 2 paragraphs for this. You need to write about interpretation 2. You need to write about a paragraph interpretation 1. and then a judgment. That's all you need. So let's do this. My point for paragraph 1. Here we go. Interpretation 2 argues that Germany's churches mostly cooperated with Nazi control. Okay, that's what it says. I'm not breaking the bank here. I'm just literally saying what it says. Let's back it up with some knowledge. Many Protestant Catholic leaders welcomed Hitler becoming Chancellor in 1933 because they feared communism and believed that the Nazis would protect traditional values. That was in the interpretation. That's not particularly difficult. Then the Catholic Church signed the Concordat in 1933, which limited priests speaking out against the Nazis in return for protection of the church. We said that in question 3A. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is stuff we've already done. So then we're going to explain how does that support interpretation 2. That what we just said there, how does that support interpretation 2? Well, it supports interpretation 2 because it shows that the church leaders chose cooperation instead of challenging Nazi government. By doing this, they allowed the Nazis to increase their control without much opposition. Yeah, they didn't do anything. They just chose to cooperate. Now, this is where we're getting... So all of that'll get you a nice level 3 answer. Probably get you about 10, 11 marks if you did that twice with a nice little conclusion. But to get into our big money answers. However, this interpretation does not fully show the resistance that did exist within the churches, because it's clearly not talked about people like Martin Niemöller or the Catholic priests who did resist. Some Christians did speak out, especially at a local level. Okay? The language and interpretation 2, so this is the tricky bit, focuses on church leaders going along. Now, I think it's really difficult when we're in history to try and apply our English skills. But this is where your history teachers are looking for you to sort of cross your skills over. Where is it that you can pick out your English language skills and go, okay, they're going along with the Nazis. It highlights cooperation, but it makes the response seem more one-sided than it actually is. Yeah, they're just going along with it. Well, are they? Do they seem like they're going along with it on the surface? So use your critical thinking skills here. Okay, let's have a look at interpretation 2. Interpretation 1, sorry. If this is confusing, please stick it in the chat, okay? Interpretation 1 suggests that the churches showed some resistance to Nazism, but that it was limited. Again, we're just saying what the interpretation says. It explains that many priests and pastors were punished, with hundreds being sent to Dachau, showing that some Christians did oppose Nazi control. It also shows that churches tried to protect their own traditions and independence. So again, we're just literally restating stuff that's either in the interpretations or that we covered when we were doing the knowledge for our question 3A. How does that back up what interpretation says? This supports interpretation 1 because it proves that the resistance existed, especially from groups like the Confessing Church and leaders such as Martin Niemöller. This is stuff we know because we put it in question 3A. However, interpretation 1 also admits that churches did not strongly challenge Nazi violence or the treatment of Jews, which shows that their resistance was weak and selective. So we're saying interpretation 1 makes some good points, but it also admits that the churches were not strong. Then, again, use your English skills. The language is careful and balanced. It says the churches offered less than fundamental resistance, which makes the interpretation less convincing. And then finally, you're just going to do a conclusion. So what you're going to do is you're going to pull the threads together. So far you've said interpretation 1 doesn't fully show the resistance. Interpretation 2 admits that the church's resistance wasn't strong. So what you're saying, you've said that there was some resistance, but it wasn't strong. So you need to pull all that through together into a nice little package in a bow, pull the bow together. In conclusion, I agree with interpretation 2 to some extent because church leaders often cooperated with the Nazis. However, interpretation 1 is also important because it shows that some Christians did resist, even though this resistance was limited. Overall, cooperation was more common than resistance. And that's it. And that will completely pull all your ribbons together. That is a beautiful 16-mark answer and will easily get you the marks. Okay, are there any questions on this?
Yeah, so the question, the green part, can you just analyse the language in there?
No, the green part is about showing that you know information about this topic. You can use information that you've covered in questions 3A, 3B and 3C, but it does need to be, you can repeat the knowledge, but it does need to be questions, information that you have brought from outside of this question. Language analysis is very much a bolt-on at the end.
Okay, so it shows knowledge.
Yeah, the green part is knowledge. And that's it, really. So, and that is the whole of questions 3A, 3B and 3C. Hopefully that has cleared some things up for you. If anyone's got any further questions, I'll just sort of hang on for a couple of minutes. But otherwise, that's us for today. Thank you so much, guys, for coming in and joining me. And I will see you next time.
Do you have a breakdown of points for the 16 points in terms of, you've got the...
Yeah, I can share that. I'll put it on my... I'll link it in the live now, actually. I'll put it in the chat, so bear with me. I'll share that. I've got a model answer, so I'll share that now.
That was just me. I found it very helpful. You say like 1 point here, 1 point here, 2 points there.
No problem at all.
Good question saying I've got my mock tomorrow. Do you have any other tips?
With your mock, the top tip is just to make plan, absolutely plan, take your time, and follow the path of the paper. I know some teachers say to do things in different orders, like do it in order of questions and so on, but I think the reason that maybe do question 3 first, but the reason that question 3 is in the order that it's in is to build you up to the point where you're answering question 3D like the way it is, and that I think is the most sensible order to write it in. So write question 3 in the order that it's written in. Other than that, I think it's just take your time. Like, you know, don't rush. You have got longer than you think you have. There are lots. I have got lots of videos on technique for this, though. So, you know, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I've got a whole playlist on Weimar and Nazi Germany, so have a look at that as well. I'm just trying to work out how I can share this. I'll just upload it to my website. Bear with me. I'm just going to upload the structure sheet to my website, guys. If you bear with me a second, it won't be long. Just got to log into my website.
That was the original link. That one, the
I'm just
original
gonna
complaints.
put the link in.
I'm gonna put the link in now. Just bear with me. Add media.
There we go.
There we go.
There you go, guys. You should be able to download that. Let me know if there's a problem.
There you go, guys. You should be able to download that. Let me know if there's a problem. Right, wrong mute.
That went well.
Yeah, I think we're all right.
I don't miss doing that although and school stuff. God.
Every day. Actually, perfect timing as well.
Yeah, that's what I those extra minutes. Other than like, obviously you need to have had other knowledge going on. Like, a large amount of the answers are in there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys, I'm going to close the live now, but I'm going to.
Okay, guys, I'm going to close the live now, but I'm going to, obviously the comments will stay on and the live